Hi, everybody. It's your favorite U.S. history teacher coming at you live once again. Today, we're going to finish out this unit, man. We're going to finish out this unit. This is the stuff that we've got to finish up. And really, this presentation is just the social movements. Okay, it's just the social movements. You can take a look here on your standards. But I've broken it down. I've broken it down by this environmental movement that we've got going on. We've got an anti-war movement. We've had this civil rights movement. We're going to continue to start chipping away and continue making progress there. We've also got a women's liberation movement, followed by some agricultural unionism, as I call it, and we'll get into all of this stuff. One of the big things that I want you guys to understand, with the 1960s, especially the late 60s, everything was being challenged. All right, everything was being challenged. Coming out of World War II, we were trying to re-identify ourselves, and while you had that culture of conformity in the 1950s, a lot of people rejected those new ideas and those new norms. So what we're going to see here is in the 1960s, people are protesting everything. We see women's liberation movement start. We see this. This is really an interesting. Like, it's half civil rights, it's half anti-war. It's all awesome. It's all great protest. You've got an environmental movement that we get kicked up here in just a moment. And of course, well, hippies are going to be hippies, man. Come 68, that's a wild year. If any of you guys ever gets a time machine, you gotta take people on tours to 1968 and 2020, because those are the years to watch people just freak, man. It's great. But yeah, let's get started. Again, one of the things that I do want to really emphasize is that these are all social movements. This is all stuff that started started with us, we the people. We were the ones pushing our government to make these changes. And in the ones that we're talking about today, in the 70s, we did see significant growth and change and varying elements of success from each one of these movements. All right, we're going to start off with the environmental movement. Okay, this right here, this is Rachel Carson. And any given year you've got an EOC, Rachel Carson, she is going to live and breathe on your EOC. All right, Rachel Carson back in 1962 wrote a book called Silent Spring. Okay. Now, Rachel was a biologist, a writer, an ecologist. And again, in 62, she writes this book, Silent Spring, where she really challenges the practices of agricultural scientists and the U.S. government to stop using pesticides. Her argument was that we were, silently killing ourselves. And that if we continued to use these chemicals and these pesticides, it would eventually leach into our groundwater. And when the spring rolled around, it would be silent. No flora, no fauna, no bees, us. All right. Rachel Carson's going to start this movement. It really gets kicked off the ground, and we can see, what was happening. Well, I feel like this still happens in Dawsonville today, but, whatever. We're going to see real movement later on in the 70s in terms of an environmentalist movement. In 1970, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, would be created. It was founded due to growing concerns about pollution. And the EPA is, at least in name, supposed to protect the environment. Man, you could argue both ways, that they do a great job and they do a horrific job. I'm not even gonna get started because I'll flip out and go back into my college save days, and that's not what this lesson's for, but come by my room sometime. We'll get all kinds of weird. All right. Other things that are going to come out of this environmentalist movement started by Rachel Carson is Earth Day. All right, in the 70s, Senator from Tennessee, I believe, Gaylord Nelson, is going to push for Earth Day. And so we celebrate every April 22nd. If you're in my class on April 22nd, we're going to hug trees. We're going to give like shout outs to Rachel Carson, and Gaylord Nelson. Hail Gaylord. Because, why else wouldn't you want to go out in the middle of spring and hug trees? That's what we're going to do. Hopefully we're all together. Probably not though. Anyway, let's roll. All right. Other movements. Of course, there's the anti-Vietnam movement going on. Vietnam's not going so well for us. Come 68. I mean, remember 68, January 68 was the beginning of the Tet Offensive. By March, LBJ says, I'm not even running for re-election. And so this anti-war or this anti-Vietnam or just really anti-war protests that are going on is a huge social movement. There's the Vietnam War has been broadcast in our living rooms on TV. You've got that Hunger Games scrolling list of people that are from your area that may have died. It turned the American public's opinion of the war in a bad way. And then you compound it with a boy, Walter Cronkite, saying that he fears this might be an unwinnable war, and this war movement is going to continue to build until, well, the war's over. All right. Now, in terms of war, and I like the little segue here because we were just talking Vietnam, and I mentioned that that OBJ in March of 68 says, yo, I'm not running in the election, which is November of 68. Okay. For the Democrats, they really kind of got put, in a bit of a scramble. But the guy who starts to come out as the real leader, potential candidate is going to be Bobby Kennedy, RFK. And so he's picking up steam. He's winning some primaries. We'll revisit Bobby here once we get into later in 68. But you've got anti-war movements going on. You've got civil rights movement. You've got the emergence of Bobby Kennedy. And last time we saw Bobby Kennedy, remember, he was going after vote foilers and schools that won't integrate. And man, he's just as dreamy as his brother. And potentially we're on our way back to Camelot. Okay. And civil rights is digging Bobby. The anti-war people, Bobby saying the right things, for most of them. But the civil rights, let's pause for a second because I do need to talk about, Martin Luther King Jr. All right. Man, Jr., he's been moving, all over the place, with this nonviolent civil rights movement and doing, he's been doing a lot. And there's been a lot of violent resistance to the movement. Remember, we talked about in class that the way that you make a movement like what Martin Luther King was doing, the way you make it illegitimate is to turn it violent. And so, at these protests, we saw it in Birmingham. The protests that started off peaceful and nonviolent kind of got flipped, and violence erupted, and that's what their attention fixated on. Now, with all this happening, Junior's still going to continue to move forward. He is actually going to go back to Memphis. He had just earlier been in Memphis like a month before he ends up at the Lorraine Motel here. And the whole thing went violent. He's back. My dog's probably going to stick her nose through here and try to say hi. Oh, look at this. Oh, I got a dog. I love YouTube lectures. They're great. That's a good dog. Anyway, you want to talk about Martin Luther King Jr.? You just want to smell this sweet jacket. I know. It sits in a closet most of the time, but it's got that good flavor on it. She's done with me now. All right, now back to you people. talking about Martin Luther King Jr. going to Memphis. Cool. Yeah. So he's going back to Memphis. He's leading a march and giving speeches largely for janitation workers. Remember, there's still not really, well, there's supposed to be enforceable laws that prohibit discrimination in employment, and yet what we're seeing in Memphis is bottom of the barrel and terrible paid jobs for black males. Now, Junior's gonna go, and in Memphis, really the night before he dies, he gives what in my opinion is his strongest speech ever. And it's the I've been to the mountaintop speech. In fact, man, don't take my word for it. Hit pause right here at 10.5 minutes. Hit pause right now. Look up Martin Luther King Jr.'s I've been to the mountaintop speech, and wow, man, it's incredible. My favorite part, because he starts off shaky, and then, once he really starts to pick into that cadence that Junior would speak with, and everybody, I mean, he's got control of the crowd. He's a great speaker. And he says, and I've been to the mountaintop, and I've seen the promised land, and oh, hallelujah. And then he kind of slips in, I might not get to the promised land with you. And a lot of people didn't catch that. But he says it, but he says, I might not get to the promised land with you. And in the event that I don't, you've got to continue. You've got to continue forward with this nonviolent movement. He's promising, all the things in his I Have a Dream speech. Man, it's there. I've been to the mountaintop. I see the promised land. We're almost there. We got to finish it. All right. It's amazing. Everybody goes out that night, and there's lots of rejuvenated, excitement and belief in the nonviolent movement. Next morning, Junior and the SCLC boys are here at the Lorraine Motel. And they're getting ready to go to the next city, do the next protest movement thing. And Junior steps out on the balcony, takes a big old deep breath, and gets sniped by that guy. Okay. James Earl Ray. James Earl Ray had been tracking Junior for some time, knew exactly where he was going to stay, set up in let's just call it what it is. It was basically a flop house, but had direct access. To view the area in which he knew / believed Junior would be, and took him out. And that's crazy. He took out Martin Luther King Jr. and Junior's the leader of the nonviolent resistance. In the wake of Junior's death, man, Memphis for sure, but across the country, everything's going to turn into structure fires. Massive protesting because you just took out Martin Luther King Jr. That's kind of whack. But the movement must continue. He's said he saw the promised land. We got to keep moving on. And the Democrats potentially have JFK's little brother running for him. Like I was saying, Bobby Kennedy, RFK, was doing great going through some of the primaries. California really kind of became make or break. The thought was if Bobby Kennedy can win California, the same state that Richard Nixon, who the Republicans are going to run in 68, by the way, Nixon was from California. And so the thought is if RFK can win California and win it, by a nice margin, there's a chance that he can legitimately compete with California and upset Nixon in the election, in spite of the debacle that is LBJ's administration at this point. Okay. Now, not only does he win, he wins big in California. Great celebration that night in the hotel. As they were leaving, somebody suggested that Bobby leave through the back exit, and kind of like through the kitchen, the access area. And this guy right here, Sirhan, is going to approach Bobby Kennedy and shoot him. We can see the picture right there. Man, it's weird. It's weird. Sirhan actually for a little while is going to claim to be the Manchurian candidate. And we talked before we went on this whole COVID thing about, just the crazy mad science with psychology in the 60s and 70s. And man, him claiming Manchurian Candidate fits the bill. Again, we don't have a whole lot of time. We're about 15 minutes at this point. I'm going to fit it in today. Come by sometime. We'll talk about Manchurian Candidates and all that fun stuff, and life will be good. All right. But man, these two guys getting assassinated is going to have huge implications on the social movements. Not only a presidential election, but largely the civil rights movement. All right. Civil rights movement is largely splintered at this point. You've got Junior, who again was the leader of the SCLC, who had SNCC basically being his foot soldiers throughout this movement, and now the leadership's been cut out. The leadership's gone. There's going to be a lot of people who say, okay, we got to continue on and work within the powers that were set up for us, and a lot of those people are going to start falling at NAACP. All right, the people who said, "Yo, I've had enough. It's time to meet force with force." A lot of them are going to follow the Black Panthers or cats like Malcolm X. Okay. Now let's talk about the Black Panthers and Malcolm X real quick, because they definitely deserve some attention. The only thing that most people ever talk about when talking about civil rights is the nonviolent movement. All right, we got to talk nonviolent movement, and there's a reason for that. If it's all you talk about, then that's all that's real, right? However, the civil rights movement, we talked about it back in the 20s, how you've got leadership like Booker T, you've got leadership like Webb, you got Marcus Garvey, you've got all of these differing opinions of how to get to the same end goal. The same thing was true of the more modern civil rights movement. Okay. Malcolm X, man, this guy comes out, and gets hooked up, with the Nation of Islam. And at the time, even still some today, Nation of Islam, a lot of intense rhetoric, that blames the struggle and the plight of Black society on the white devil. All right. Now X in modern media, gets his legacy kind of gets tarnished on that because it gets attached to that rhetoric. But X really was a by any means necessary kind of guy. He said, we can't sit around and wait for these things to happen. Now X is going to have a pretty wild path from really, his teenage years to the day that he gets assassinated. But he very much, what I want to emphasize here today in this lecture, is that X is your by any means necessary. And people are tired of turning the other cheek, and people are tired of feeling that they have to work within the system, especially because it's an unjust system. All right. And so a lot of those people are going to start following the teachings and the likings of Malcolm X. Now, you've also got Huey Newton. All right. Huey Newton's one of the key founders of the Black Panther Party. And the Black Panther Party is another group that kind of gets vilified in our society a lot of times. But in reality, what the Black Panthers were doing was self-defense. It was rough living in these communities that had to deal with police officers and other officials coming in and targeting people. And so the kind of the goal of the Black Panthers were to prevent that from happening in their communities. Everybody immediately, goes and thinks, oh, a militant group of dudes. Yeah, they're gonna, you're gonna bust them in the mouth. They're gonna bust you back. But it's amazing, their protests, they always get, labeled as militant and idealistic. And I don't think all those are true. But man, they are the ones that really kind of start testing Second Amendment rights. Before the Black Panthers really start, walking into state legislatures armed to the teeth, peacefully, legally carrying, white America's gonna freak out, man. They're gonna freak out. And we see how, some of your perceptions, when I first started saying Black Panthers, oh, they're mean, bad, angry. That's what we've been told. They did a great job of quelling gang violence. They got a lot of drugs out of their communities, and did some really positive things throughout all of this, and so that's why they were attractive in this movement. All right. Oh yeah, women's lib, baby. I dig it. Hannah Manikowski, this is for you right here. Women's lib. Every year I teach this stuff. You're right there on the forefront of my noggin. So women's lib. Really what we're going to see, all right? We're going to see the person that I'm going to really kind of, say is the leader of what we call third wave feminism. One of the true founders, so to speak, is this woman, Betty Friedan. Okay. Betty Friedan is going to write the book, The Feminist, or The Feminine Mystique. All right. And what this book is going to do is really challenge the notions of gender roles in that 1950s culture of conformity. It really is a rallying cry back to, the ideals and the progress of the ideals of that 1920s new woman. Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique is going to launch third wave feminism. And what we're going to see in terms of that is a lot of traction. One of the big movements or one of the big organizations is going to be NOW, the National Organization for Women. NOW was founded back in 1966 and wanted to take action for women's equality. All right. Where we're going to see NOW make, the biggest splash is in this landmark court case, Roe v. Wade. All right. Now, it's about abortion. And I'm going to tread as lightly as I can through this stuff. Because abortion's a hot button topic. Everybody feels strongly one way or the other about it. Okay. And be careful with that. Please be careful with that, because politicians know it's a hot button topic. And so, a lot of the politicians that'll immediately come out and say, yo, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-choice. It's like, okay, cool. But that really doesn't have much to do with constitutional governance. How are you going to run the show? Those are the things that I would encourage you to take a deeper dive at when listening to these talking heads. But with this, okay, with Roe v. Wade, and abortion. Man, I feel like I just have to say it. Guys, I'm going to talk directly to you guys. Let me give you a helpful hint. If you walk into a room and people are talking about abortion, get out. Get out. Don't be in there. You shouldn't open your mouth. You should just keep kind of doing your own thing and walk on. If you're the reason why people are talking about abortion, then be supportive. Be supportive. Now, I'm not gonna say, that you should be pro-life or pro-choice. That's up to you, man. That's a beautiful thing about this country is that you get to make that choice. I would suggest, as taking that stance of, don't talk about it. That's not you. If you don't like the idea of abortion, then be selective with the people that you choose to take risks with. And be with like-minded individuals. I think that's the best way to move forward. Now, in terms of the constitutional and the way that the judicial court sat on this thing, 1973, Roe v. Wade, it got established. And they said that abortions are okay. Okay, that they kept abortions legal with Roe v. Wade. Now, one of the things you have to understand is, that judgment, okay? The whole real idea here, and National Organization for Women, who's really kind of pushing this case, their argument is not one of morality. Okay, and I know that that's the easy one to immediately jump in. It's not an issue of morality. The issue and really throughout the whole thing, they don't talk much about morality. What they really want to talk about is that abortions have been around forever, and if a woman wants it, she's going to get it. All right, and if you make it illegal, then you make it unsafe. And women are going to have to, women that want it and are going to do it irregardless of legality. Wow, I can't even speak. Legalities. Make it so that they can have it done in a clean, sterile, professional environment. That right there is why. That's the argument that won over the Warren Court here in 73. And that continues to be the stance that the Supreme Court has taken. Now, before you get all into, oh, well, the Supreme Court is all kinds of conservative. No, I know. I watched the whole political theater. But just remember that the Supreme Court can only go back and review cases that have been challenged up to the Supreme Court. So, we could talk endlessly on this, but, I just want you guys to understand why in 73 it was made legal, and also warn you to tread lightly, because it's something that people are super passionate about. Super, super passionate. All right. Now, let's talk about my boy Cesar Chavez. If you've been in my room the past couple years, Cesar's been the dude that's been holding up Gambino. And we've been waiting all year to figure out who this dude is. He is Cesar Chavez, farm labor leader and Latino civil rights leader. Chavez is going to use the same kind of style that Junior used, that nonviolent public relations approach, but in his case, to unite workers and Latinos. All right. The agricultural industry is the only thing that has not been touched by unions up to this point. And in some cases, man, we still got sharecropping in the 1970s. As wild to think as that is, we still got economic slavery rolling through a lot of places, especially in the South. What Cesar Chavez is going to do is co-found the UFW, all right, the United Farm Workers. And what we're going to see by boycotting grapes, by boycotting, the poultry industry, we're going to see that Cesar Chavez is going to gain a tremendous amount of bargaining power on behalf of the agricultural workers, not the big industry that owns everything, but the people who are actually getting their hands dirty. And so we'll see that as a big move in terms of agricultural unionism. With all of that said and done, I believe that's it. I hope that this was helpful. I'm going to try to get like a Google Meet or something before this up at some point before the next exam, which is actually next week. But yeah, if you've got questions, holler at me through the World Wide Web. And as always, comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. Not about the lecture, but, about how I can do all this stuff better. Maybe lighting, whatever. I'm out.